Spinal adjustments provided by Dr. Chad Rolfson. The Spinal Tuning Chiropractic Center is a Des Moines area low flat fee per month unlimited chiropractic care practice. When life happens, just adjust. Schedule today at spinaltuning.com. Welcome to One-on-One. I am your host, Jimmy Olsen. Joining me today is from the Justin Brady Show. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Justin Brady. How are you, man?
Good. Thanks for having me on One-on-One.
Yeah, and of course, now that's not the only thing you do. I mean, that's the cool thing, your little podcast that they can pretty much find anywhere they listen to their favorite podcast, right?
Anywhere. I'm on all the things.
all the things, all the time.
Yes.
But now the real job, because that's kind of like your little, side hustle passion, but you have a company called Cultivate, which you do, communication, PR search engine optimization, things like that.
Things like that. Yeah. External comms stuff. Absolutely.
Which is kind of the rollover from the marketing guru that you were over the many years.
So much of a marketing guru that my marketing company went out of business. But I know.
Well, there's just a lot of competition, man. I mean, there's so many to try and figure out with that.
For me, it wasn't that really the competition. It was the fact that I started losing interest in it. And I wasn't naturally really that good at it. And so when those two things are true, it's only a matter of time till your competition just obliterates you. So, the PR and comms and helping, basically the focus is emerging tech companies, because emerging tech companies are working on amazing technologies, but they also just suck at communicating that stuff to the layman. And so I have a knack for taking very complex features, complex technologies, and communicating those to their target market. So,
and the biggest thing, like you just said, is you want to stay engaged with what you're doing. You want to like it. You want to enjoy it. And
you got it.
Once you start, losing that interest, it just really falls to the wayside.
Yeah, I was talking to a guy today who was I'm not sure if he wanted to use me or if he was vetting me for something else. I have no idea. It was kind of an odd call, but he did say, like, how do you pick your clients? Like, how do you get your clients? And I'm like, I find a cool company and call them. Like, that's literally all I do.
I choose the guys that actually give me money and pay their bill.
That way it's a genuine conversation. I don't call someone and say, let's do business because you have money. I say, let's do business because what you're doing is freaking cool.
And you have money because, you still got to pay your bills.
Money. That's always good.
Well, one of the reasons I was wanting to have the conversation with you, Justin, and I mean, we've known each other for years, and with my radio background and me being in radio, and then, of course, you kind of like dabbling in it a little bit, you're like, that's really kind of cool, which then kind of came out where you started the Justin Brady podcast, or the Justin Brady Show, as you've labeled that. Is I'm kind of wanting to have that conversation about journalism, about media, and with our take on how we're even on the inside looking out, and we even get frustrated of how they drop the ball on so many things. And the reality is this isn't new. They've been doing it for years.
True. Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it's just that you always heard about the journalism integrity, your source, making sure it's true and things like that. But now I think you're losing that integrity because they're not even reporting everything or holding people accountable the way they should, depending on who you are, of course.
Right, of course. And, it comes back to, I tell people, you get the politicians you deserve, and you also get the media you deserve. Mm-hmm. People will complain to me because, I'm pitching to a lot of these big, Wall Street Journal, Harvard Business Review, whatever. I'm pitching to these places for clients, and people will complain and they'll say, these guys don't cover the news. They don't cover really good stuff. They don't do their due diligence. They don't do research. And, yeah, you're right. They don't, but there's a reason they don't do that, because you're not going to read it. And it's kind of sad, but like they're giving you junk food and candy because that's all people want to read. And so I tell people, if you don't want that junk, and if you want your politicians held accountable, then only read that stuff. But They have the metrics, they have the data, and they know what you're clicking on. And if they do a rage piece that has absolutely no fact checking and it favors one side or the other, and you click on it, guess what they're going to continue doing? They're going to continue doing crap journalism that has no facts or data, that isn't vetted, that isn't researched, and they're going to keep serving that up to you because you keep clicking it. All that matters is that, and you know the business too. All that matters is, well, can we still sell advertising though? Because that's how they stay afloat. And if no one's clicking, that means no advertisers are interested, sadly.
Well, I think you kind of nailed it a little bit there too, is it's picking the sides. You're not finding the non-biased journalism anymore like you used to. You're not looking at both sides. You're not picking it apart on both sides. You're just picking it on one side. And it's interesting because I remember this was a few years ago how NPR actually got slapped for that. And the funny thing is how they've become almost more non-biased over the years compared to the commercial media and how they do things.
Yeah, I mean, so I think a lot of people want to. What is it? Doesn't the Wall Street Journal like have double the subscribers, double the circulation size as the New York Times or something like that?
Something like that.
You know, people want, like, this is the thing. People, it's a shorter path to serve people up junk food and junk journalism. That's a shorter path to getting subscribers, but it's not really a long-term strategy because the Wall Street Journal still has double the New York Times. The Wall Street Journal, that's like my go-to news source because I can't tell you which, except for like Kim Strazzle, who is a admittedly conservative opinion column. At the top of any of her pieces, it says in bright orange letters, opinion. Like, it's very, very obvious. But like their news, you can't tell if they're left or right. You have no idea. The New York Times, you can tell.
Right.
You can tell. It's fairly obvious. And I was on another podcast with a journalist. It was his podcast, and he's very left. And he'll tell you he's very, very left. And his words were, "Hey, I'm really, really far left, and I like CNN's coverage. I like it. It tastes really good. I agree with all their opinions." He goes, "But it's not news. It's an opinion network." Because it's a left opinion network. And like, as much as I like that, it's not news. He was like, I was told your opinion doesn't, when I was doing news, and he used to work for a local TV station here in Des Moines, where at least I'm located. He was saying, when I was in news, I was taught that your opinion when you're doing news doesn't matter. Like, you cover the facts, you cover it straight, and, take your opinion and shove it down your own throat because no one wants to hear it. He goes, but I guess that's not the thing now. I guess we're all supposed to weave our opinion into the news and let our opinion dictate the news. And
it's
that's not
become editorials now.
Yeah. The news is one big opinion. Like the news in most networks, sadly, at least more, especially cable networks, it's all editorializing. It's all opinion. There is no news.
And it doesn't matter to me if you are left or right, Democrat, Republican. I don't care where you lean. The bottom line is looking at both sides of the story, or if something leaks, grab it and run with it. Hold someone accountable. And we're going to, and like right now, and let's kind of even get into that, because we're watching the news. And what are we seeing on the news right now? We are seeing, because the election is coming up, so we're seeing election. We are seeing all this other stuff that's happening with, the police shootings and stuff like that in Wisconsin and other cities. That is just engulfing the news.
Right.
For a while there, the whole COVID-19, the coronavirus, was sort of engulfing the news.
Yeah.
At least during the lockdown. Now that most states are kind of open again, it's fell more onto the wayside. But I guess here's the part. I mean, so fine, you're gonna fill the newscast with all these things that are happening. You're gonna do it with politics. You're gonna, in one way or another. Even with a lot of the things that are happening, it's still being turned into some political move on how they're choosing what goes on. But now over the last month, we have found so many issues with the reporting of COVID-19. It might get a mention on the news, but that's it. It's like, here's the mention, and then it goes away. What happened?
I think what happened, or what is happening, is that this is being used, in my opinion, it's being, just based on what I read every day, which we seem to have whiplash with data. The most famous example was, you don't need masks, then you need masks. I think what's happening is it's either one side, both sides. I'm not smart enough to know, but someone or some entity is trying to use this to craft a narrative. Now, I think coronavirus is real. Like, I was talking to one guy in an elevator. He's like, "Well, you don't think coronavirus is real?" I'm, whoa, buddy! I think coronavirus is real. I think it's serious, and I think it's killed some people. Like, I think it's a big freaking deal. But I can hold these two views at the same time, which is, yes, it's real. Yes, it's concerning. Yes, we should watch it. And yes, it's being used as a political tool for the election. And I'm not the first to say it, but there are a lot of people who've said, you watch, as soon as this election happens, coronavirus is just not going to be a concern anymore, and no one's going to care.
Well,
and
there's two things to that. But real quick, you're listening to One-on-One. I am your host, Jimmy Olsen, chatting with Justin Brady from the Justin Brady Show. So to go on what you just said, the whole thing, when November happens, the election is over, the coronavirus disappears. This is what I'm seeing, one of two narratives. Either A, it disappears, or depending on who wins, we all of a sudden find ourselves becoming a socialist country.
I hope not. I don't think it'll disappear. I just think the coverage won't care anymore. I think it'll disappear from the news.
Wait a minute, we're already there.
Yeah, well, it's getting close, right? Like, I was just sharing a piece written August 29th from the New York Times. We were talking about this before we hit record. And it says, your coronavirus test is positive. Maybe it shouldn't be. And if you read through the piece, they talk about how people are testing positive that aren't even contagious and are asymptomatic because the tests are too sensitive. And I'm like, wait a minute. We were going from extremist, watch out, all these tests, this is concerning, look at how many people are infected, to, well, even if your test said you were infected, that might not be that big of a deal. And so I'm looking at this, of course, as a PR guy. I know that this stuff comes from someone pitched this idea, or someone had an angle to go after, or someone had a narrative to push. And I'm thinking, ooh, here, the narrative, the angle is changing. Like, the original story didn't work for someone or something. And I'm not going to say it's the Democrats or the Republicans.
No, I mean, you have no clue who's pushing it.
I have no clue. I really have no clue, because they both tend to take their side and show why they've been the responsible ones, and the other side's been reckless. So the other side's been stupid, right? But I'm like, I see this in the New York Times, and I'm like, ooh, the narrative is already changing. Like, we're already going from this is the worst thing ever to, hey, guys, it's not that big of a deal. And so a lot of people are asking, well, then why did we shut down everything?
Well, here's the other side that you even have looking at that. I mean, one of the first things that was said when this even happened, when it started, it's not if you get it, it's when you get it. That kind of disappeared. They're not discussing that anymore. Then it was, we need to do this to we need to do this to slow the spread. Yes. Well, now all of a sudden it went from slow the spread to eradicating it. Okay,
correct. Yep.
It's a virus. It's the flu. It cannot be eradicated. It is here to stay, which has also been said. It is here to stay. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah. And it did go from flatten the curve to eradicate the virus pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's just, I think everybody, like, if you look at, I think it was Gallup had some really interesting data. When the coronavirus coverage started, Republicans and Democrats were pretty much unified in how to approach it.
Mm-hmm.
They were you can go look it up, Gallup has the data, but basically Republican, Democrat opinion for the coronavirus or something. And what happened was, as soon as, so I think it was Republicans and Democrats were equally concerned. No. I take that back. Republicans were actually slightly more concerned about the spread of COVID-19 than Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as it got politically weaponized, and Republicans started seeing Democrats use this as a tool to discredit their president, that's when the sides switched. That's when Republicans all of a sudden said, no big deal. And Democrats said, this is the worst pandemic in global history. It will kill everybody. When you see things diverge. So now, which side is right? I don't know. But what I do not know is when you politicize something and you throw the truth aside, then basically everyone... no one can take an objective side anymore. There are just sides. No one cares about the truth anymore. They care about, well, I'm going to read this article, I'm going to see this data, and I'm going to run it through my sideism filter first. Does this help my side or does this hurt my side? And then based on that, then I will choose my talking points.
Well, the other issue that you had on that too, and where they started slapping Trump, is because when it first started coming out, he basically came out and said, this isn't really a big deal. This is happening in China. These are the infections, and it's not that thing. All of a sudden, it crosses our border. It's in the U.S. It starts spreading like wildfire. And now they're like, well, wait a minute. You said that it wasn't such a big deal. Now look at it. Now it's a bigger deal than what it was. Now we need to shut everything down, do the lockdowns, which then has created issues with people losing jobs, with people, not having even with job because furloughs or whatever the reason being. I mean, it's been more of an economic beatdown than it has been a health beatdown in some ways.
What's interesting is the president and the I would call a lot of media entities that are leaning left and a lot of Democrat senators and Congress people actually agreed early on. If you go back and look at all the news, they all agreed. But when Trump made a statement that it's not a big deal, that's when everybody took the opposite position.
Right. No, absolutely. Well, and this is so again, here's the interesting
thing. Like the
Colin
Kaepernick story, right? Like he was kind of like everyone's just kind of like, he's a guy that hates cops and he is mad that he's not a starter anymore, whatever. But as soon as Trump commented on it, Colin Kaepernick was put into the spotlight, and now he leads like this global movement.
Right. And then he disappeared and nobody hears anything about it until an interview about a week or two ago with the whole the defund the police that a lot of these states are hearing. And it's like, well, Colin Kaepernick was talking about this a few years ago. We should have listened to him more.
Yeah. Right. And it's like, if you want to be famous, just have Trump criticize you, and then the media will do it for you.
Well, maybe we'll get enough criticism in this episode that maybe I'll become famous, and we'll be that next step.
Well, you have to get Trump to criticize you first, Jimmy.
If
Trump
true.
criticizes you, then you're good.
Well, so again, you're listening to One on One. I am your host, Jimmy Olsen. I'm chatting with Justin Brady from the Justin Brady Show. So, all right, let's go into the beginning of this. We were kind of unified. We split. Everybody choose their side. Wear a mask. Don't wear a mask. But then now we fast forward 5 months. So we'll go past that initial 90-day piece of this. We're getting into June, July. All of a sudden, all the states or the CDC, they were thrown in to force this database that they did not have because they're going to start testing you for the coronavirus, which I was actually listening to a show which always, no matter anything I say, always fact check anything I say. And I will always say that. We've heard this for years. Trust and verify.
Yeah,
but I heard it was an interview with a doctor, and he said that the basis for any flu is a coronavirus. So even the flu is a type of. This is just a new strain that has been introduced. Okay. A new strain, which again, every year we get the flu. Guess what? Somehow it's always a new strain of flu that we get every flu season, right?
Right.
Interesting how that works.
Yeah, they have to predict those for the flu vaccine.
Yeah, go with that.
Which they often fail at, by the way.
Exactly. So we have the CDC. The CDC is making their reports. The CDC is doing their thing. all of a sudden, and this is, I think, every single state, I mean, even Iowa, there's been a fail on this, but they found out that they were double reporting. You know, a person would go in and get tested positive. They go in another week. They go in, you know, because they keep going back until they got a negative test so they could go back to work or go back to whatever it was that they were doing. So, because they had to have a negative test. Well, instead of it being 3 tests for one person, that was 3 positive tests of the coronavirus.
See, I haven't even seen this yet. It doesn't really surprise me with how poorly this has been handled.
So that was the first thing. And again, now we're talking about media. So that kind of hits it for a moment. So again, one quick little news story. This is what we're talking about. And then all of a sudden it vanishes. They don't talk about it anymore. To me, that's news. Why are you not forcing the CDC to talk to you and say, you know, hey, there's a problem here. Why is it a problem? How are you going to fix this?
But it's not news, right? It's narrative. It's not news, it's narrative. Narrative sells, news does not. I mean, obviously you and I both know over the long term news does, but over the short term we want junk food. You know, long term it just makes you, you know, like not healthy and you can't sleep and you don't feel good. But it's the short term game they're playing because some of these people rotate in so fast. It's lazy journalism is what it is. It's just super freaking lazy.
Well, is it that, or is it if they really focused on this, that it would then kill the fear-mongering that we're getting right now and we have over the past few months?
News. Yeah, I mean, fear does sell news. I mean, there's nothing worse than saying, hey, guys, this whole coronavirus thing, it's over. You can all go back to your daily lives. And, you know, they're not going to do that unless they have another news cycle to jump to first.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what stinks. You know, it stinks that our journalists that we trust to give us news don't really care about news. They care about the almighty click. And I get it. I totally get it. But, you know, it's just at this point, what has happened, Jimmy, is that too many times a lot of these news outlets have cried wolf. Mm-hmm. You know, we saw it with Russia. On both sides, we saw it in Russia. Right. We saw Schiff up there talking about, I have a source. And then fast forward a year and it's like, oh, he didn't actually have a source. You see this, it seems like every week the media takes some kind of bait and falls for it. And, you know, I will give, and this is funny, every time I defend Trump, people think I voted for him. I didn't actually vote for him. But I will give him a lot of credit for knowing how to play the media like a fiddle. He does this really great strategy where if the media gets it wrong, he feeds into it. And he lets them just kind of wallow, and he acts defensive, and then they just pry into it more thinking they finally got him, and then it turns out they just do some epic face plant. So he does know how to play him really, really well. Like everybody forgets,
he always has.
He's an entertainer. Like this is his thing.
No, wait a minute. I thought he was a real estate guy. Oh, no, it's turned out that this guy knows how to, you know, of course, you know, The Apprentice for how many years. So, yeah, he knows how to get the views. He knows how to get people to pay attention to him.
Then Newt Gingrich came to Des Moines like a couple years ago, and he was giving a little talk downtown at the historical building, and he said he was talking to Trump when he was running. And in front of him, I don't know if Newt was in the room or nearby or was talking to the president or something like this, and he said the reason he picked Mike Pence for the VP slot, and he just told Newt, like, central casting. Like, in his mind, he was running a reality show. And Newt was like, I was like, whoa, I did not realize the level at which he was, like, playing the optics game here.
Well, in some ways, it kind of is. It feels like we're in some sort of reality show or some sort of some sort of, you know, Hollywood movie. I mean, come on, things like this happen in an outbreak.
Right. And the thing is, Trump loves this. He loves like people are thinking, oh, he's so mad because he's, you know, no, he's not mad. He's having the time of his life. This is so fun for him. And like the media just keep giving him more ammunition. He's like, oh, this is even going to be, I think he's sitting in the White House and just thinking, oh, this is the news cycle. Oh my word, this is going to be fun. Hey guys, here's what we can do with this one.
Well, and I think like we said a little while ago is it's not even the news as it's the fear. I mean, we can go back into the 50s and see the whole fear thing during the Cold War and you were worried
Oh yeah,
about,
duck and
the
cover.
right, the Russians were going to attack us, and all of a sudden all these families had some sort of bomb shelter built in their backyard because
Yep.
they were afraid. They lived in fear, and now we're living in fear again. I mean, now, so here's the new one. The
Fear
new one that
sells
was
news.
released over the weekend from the CDC. All of a sudden, everyone's dying. This is so terrible. And again, I'm not by any means, I'm not saying that the coronavirus or the COVID-19 is, yes, you need to be aware. You need to wash your hands. And you need it. Well, guess what? You just need to wash your hands. Remember how you learned how to wash your hands when you were, in elementary school? I mean, the only thing that irritates the fire out of me right now is I see somebody wearing a mask. He goes to the bathroom and then he doesn't wash his hands.
Yes.
Seriously?
Yes.
You're killing me. You're killing me. Well, anyway, so the newest one that they released over the weekend, which again, I saw on the news this morning, but again, it was a quick mention, and I go to the gym today, and again, it's the violence that's happening. It's politics. The CDC has now come out. They changed the number of deaths related to COVID-19.
Oh.
And I only know this because someone shared it with me, and of course I try to verify anything. Well, then all of a sudden it hits the news this morning. I'm like, okay, so there must be something to this. So what they're saying now, the 65,000 plus deaths that we have in America, only 6% of those are true COVID-19 related deaths. So now we're talking out of that 165,000, it's like less than 10,000 people. The rest of them, yes, they might have tested positive for COVID-19. They might have tested positive, but that was not the reason that they died. It was a heart attack. It was, maybe pneumonia. It was something else was the contributing. This is why they died.
Yeah,
it wasn't the virus.
Axios is already picking up on that. They say a new Center for Disease and Control report shows 95% of people who died from COVID-19 in the U.S. had contributing health conditions. And so I haven't read the whole report that you just mentioned. I certainly will. But it goes back to something Elon Musk said on the Joe Rogan show, which is get hit by a bus, die of COVID-19.
Which then, now here comes my conspiracy theory, because I'm always great at conspiracy theories, because there was something that came out a few months ago that talked about how if a hospital, I think this is, and you verify it or don't quote me 100, but it was basically if a hospital put it down as a COVID-19 related death, you died of COVID-19, they ended up with like a $15,000 bonus.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct.
Okay, so now all of a sudden, so now this really feeds into that.
Well, yeah. So the theory there is, and this isn't fake, by the way. This is completely real. If you admit a COVID patient, you get like something like a $15,000 payout, $10,000, something like that. And if you put them on a respirator or a ventilator, excuse me, then it's a $40,000 payout. So the concern with a lot of people in medicine is, hey, you're forcing us all closed and telling us to only take COVID patients. That zaps our revenue and puts us in a really precarious position. And then you're telling us, but if we just write it down as a COVID death, we can get some of our money back. That puts a lot of clinics and hospitals in a very tempting position.
Well, that also now turns us into a piece of push the fear. Again, not having, and this goes back to the conversation today, journalists not doing their job. You made the comment earlier, lazy journalism. It wasn't handed to them. And of course, it's not 100% the journalist's fault. It's also the company's fault that owns the paper or the news, right, the TV station, the news, because basically is they have taken away all of their tools, because they're trying to do this on a shoestring budget. They're trying to do it with basically no staff. So they're not able to run out and get that story that they should be doing because they're too busy actually trying to do a job.
Right, right. So,
I mean, there's a lot of contributing factors here.
And speaking of contributing factors, what you were referring to earlier, I'm trying to look into this as we're talking, but Axios.
Hey, it's like journalism. How's that work? Wait a minute. So it's funny because we're talking about this, and I'm sure, podcasts and talk radio, things like that. Yeah, sometimes they have more journalistic integrity than watching the news. I should be getting it from the news, not having to listen to a talk show that is proving to the point right now. You're able to look this up as we're having the conversation.
So the 6% figure looks like it comes from February 1st to August 22nd.
Yes.
And it's only 6% of the cases were solely COVID. Every other 94% of the cases had other contributing factors. So only in 6% of the cases did someone die of just COVID alone. The other 94%, they say there could have been other contributing factors. Oh, no, I'm sorry. There were other contributing factors. Obviously, I don't know how much of that is, could have been 99% COVID, 1% heart disease, something like that. But that is interesting that only in 6% of the cases was it purely a COVID death. I had not even seen that until you brought that up. That's crazy.
So now people are in fear, freaking out every day. And the reality is now catching up with them, going, again, not trying to say this isn't a bad thing. Yes, you need to be concerned. But now all of a sudden, well, wait a minute, this isn't so bad.
Well, and here's the thing. Here's why that's bad. Here's why that's bad, though, for the news. This is why that's bad for the news, because you like it, Jimmy, and I like it when I create an opinion and some news pops up that verifies my opinion and allows me to feel better about myself. So now we have so many people with their made-up opinions on COVID, and indeed some presidential campaigns were run about how bad Trump is doing and stuff like that. And Trump's campaign's been running on how good of a job he did. Now if you throw into the news cycle that, those original narratives and the things you've hung your hat on are wrong, you have a lot of people that just want it to go away. And the news knows this. They know people just want to move on now. Let's not talk about it anymore. And they know all their clicks go away. And so they're not about to do that before they have another news cycle to hang on to and to get you scared again. So this might be why they're kind of holding on to this and not really wanting to flush this stuff out there. That's just my guess as a as a fellow
guy
nerd.
Well, I find it interesting, and here's something that I look. You're listening to One on One. I'm your host, Jimmy Olsen. We're chatting with Justin Brady from the Justin Brady Show. So here's an interesting piece to that. So yes, I think a majority of us are so tired of it. A majority of us are going, you know what? You're right. It's a part of our new life. It is a new normal for us. We have to be aware of this. We need to be smart. We need to take care of ourselves, which you should be doing anyway. But it's that minority. Because remember that for years, we've always heard about that whole silent majority thing.
Oh, yeah.
I think, now, I don't know that 100% that I want to say that they're actually silent, but the reason why they get that silent majority label is because the minority screams so loud.
Right.
That you cannot ignore them. So then the minority basically creates that narrative to how we're going to follow, what we're going to listen to, what is going to be given to us.
Right. And the vocal minority also tends to be a lot more aggressive and angry. And so when you speak out against that vocal minority, these are the ones that are insane, right?
Wait, you got to love everybody, though. Wait a minute. Aren't you supposed to love everyone?
The vocal minority are the ones rioting and burning things down and being stupid, comparing Trump to Hitler and comparing Joe Biden to child molester, right? Like these are your vocal crazy minorities. Well, they're so crazy and loud that when a reasonable person stands up and says, hey, I think that's way wrong, they all go crazy and they all attack that person. And what do the vocal majority people do? they do what they do best, which is they stay quiet and they don't come to the defense of that other person.
Well, there's that part. So there is some silence to them. I'm not going to disagree.
Yeah.
So again, it's that minority. So it's the minority on either side, the minority on the left side or the Democrat side, the minority on the Republican side, the right side, that screams the loudest, that creates the issues that we have. You might have, again, a little bit in the middle of that majority that, again, there could be a minority of them saying things, but they don't talk loud enough, or as you said, it doesn't feed into what people are looking for when they're trying to find whatever they're going to complain about over the water cooler today.
Right. Right.
I mean, is that what it is? I mean, let's be honest. Is that why you watch the news? So now I can see what I want to complain about today?
I guess. Like, I'm
going to go back. So again, I've been in radio for, we'll just say a long time. And there's a guy that everybody's familiar with, Howard Stern. I mean, you're familiar with Howard Stern, right?
Oh, of course.
I'll be honest. I'm in radio. I watched the movie. I should have read the book, but, I'm in radio, so I watched the movie instead. So one of the things, and I even remember this comment before the movie was released, because they were talking about when he was at the top of his game in New York City at K-Rock, I believe is where he was at that point. And he's doing these outlandish things. And people were listening to him every day. Love him or hate him, people were listening to him every day. And when people were asking him, or asked, why do you listen to Howard Stern? You had the one side is, we love him. We have no clue what he's going to do next. That's why we listen. The
Sure.
People that hated him, that still listened, well, we don't know what he's going to do next. So they're listening, so they have something to complain about of why this guy is terrible and needs to be just disappear.
It's always like, because you know that I used to have a show on WHO radio in Des Moines.
Mm-hmm.
First 2 years were a Saturday morning show, and then I got my own show, which was a little bit more top news political. But during that first couple of years, I would fill in for a couple of the local hosts, Simon Conway, Jeff Angelo, and it was always funny when I got these, like, it was a pretty much conservative station, at least in their talk and opinion.
Right.
And I would always get like these really far left people that would call in and complain about some idea I had. And I was pretty much an independent. It got to the point, I had to grow an audience, but it got to the point where I had the right and the left both equally criticizing me. I think in one 5-minute segment,
how are you not a number one show, Justin?
What?
Then how are you not a number one podcast? Come on.
Well, I was top 1%. My podcast is top 1% in the iHeartRadio app.
Well, there you go.
But no, at that time, I had a criticism from a Democrat and a Republican, or at least within the same 5 minutes. It was, go back to CNN, you liberal hack. And then 5 minutes later, it's like, shut up, you Republican Nazi fascist. And that was within 5 minutes. And so I was like, holy cow, I guess I'm on my own side on this one. But there were a lot of times that was the case. Well, and I wrote a piece about that in the local paper called I don't remember the title they gave it, like the Lonely Political Center. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking when I went into talk radio, I'm like, well, I've got to be like a Rush Limbaugh, I guess. I got to be this far-right rageaholic in order to get ratings, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, that's not me. I'm in pretty much down the middle. I'm independent. I'm fact-based. And that's the way I'm going to do my show. And so if no one listens, so be it. And the ratings reflected people actually liked it. And the ratings kept growing. Michael Medved was the show that was on before me. Mm-hmm. And he basically, without disclosing ratings, because I'm not supposed to do that, basically no one listened. And after I was on the show for maybe 2 to 3 months, it was like 6x what we had earlier. So people clearly wanted to listen. And then, of course, a year later after the show started, iHeart did their major kerfuffle and canceled every weekend program, including my own. But from that brief stint, I got to look at the fact that people actually did want that data-rich, independent, down the middle. Here are just the facts. Here's my opinion. based on those facts. They wanted that, and no one's given it to them.
Well, and that's because they quit listening, because everyone that has those facts, they're the ones that create the conspiracy theories. So that's it. We just need to start our own show, Justin, about conspiracy theories that we can start. We will just clean it up. I'm just saying.
I'll have my people talk to your people.
You're listening to One-on-One. I'm your host, Jimmy Olsen. I'm chatting with Justin Brady from the Justin Brady Show. So, I mean, I think, kind of as we get to the end of this, what it really comes down to is we need to be responsible.
Absolutely.
There's so much information out there that you need to pay attention to all of it. Yeah. Not watch one piece and create your opinion. You need to find all those pieces. It was just like as the numbers were growing in Iowa, because we're both in Iowa. And something I said to a friend of mine one time, I said, do you realize we're not at this X number of positive? Because the way it almost sounded is we've got 10,000 positive cases right now. Well, no. You need to take the positive cases. You need to subtract the recoveries. What a concept.
Right.
Remember, that whole addition subtraction thing we learned in elementary math. And then that's going to give you, and then of course you would subtract the deaths out of that too. But then that's going to give you, this is how many are currently positive in the state.
Well, I think the big takeaway for me from this whole thing is, and we talked about this on the Justin Brady Show like a month ago, was just wait. Mm-hmm. Just wait. You don't need to be the first one to rage on Twitter.
Right.
Just wait. And when you wait, when you find some data that may support your opinion and you want to tweet it out or you want to share it, just say, hey, this could be wrong. I could be wrong, but here's what I found. That way later, if you need to walk it back, you can say, oh, well, that thing I found was wrong after all. Mm-hmm. Don't take that side. Just don't do it to begin with.
Right.
Just wait. Like the whole, the most famous example in the news right now is the whole Nick Sandeman issue, like the Covington Catholic kids. Mm-hmm. The kid just standing there. And some Native American man comes up to him, beats a drum in his face. They're getting shouted at. And the news spun that into he was harassing a Native American man. And of course, everyone freaked out. Had a terrible kid, got death threats, destroyed the kid's life. Turned out later, he did nothing wrong. He was standing still, and that Native American man went and harassed him.
Right.
And so, again, this is happening with, the shootings that are happening. Again, like this one guy went and murdered a couple people. Like no one knew what happened. You had two different narratives. One was that a white guy with an assault rifle went and murdered a bunch of people. One was that he was attacked and he was a victim. Like two completely different narratives. Even though we had video, no one cares. Just wait. Don't form your opinion. Wait for the facts to come out and then talk about it like a reasonable person. But what happens is you're screwing yourself over if you take a side quickly, because I think it's called like the argumentative theory of reasoning or something like that. I'm not a psychologist, but basically if you take an opinion really, really quickly, then you're going to put yourself in that social position later where you have to defend that position. Defend your idea so you don't look like a moron. So the way you stay away from that, the way you don't put yourself in that position in the first place is just wait for stuff to come out before you form your opinion.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. It's not hard.
Are you sure? It sounds pretty difficult.
Yeah, maybe it is hard.
Well, I mean, in some ways it almost comes down to is we have to be our own. We have to do that, that journalistic integrity on our own. Do it for ourselves.
Yeah,
again, you're listening to One-on-One. I'm your host, Jimmy Olsen. I'm chatting with Justin Brady from the Justin Brady Show. So, Justin, before I go, let's get the full plug for the show. Tell us about the Justin Brady Show. What do you kind of discuss and do with that?
Yeah, the Justin Brady Show. Every platform like iTunes, Google Podcast, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, everything. We do business, work culture, communications, and of course, top stories. And we're always objective. We're data focused. And I also have basically the most top, business and culture leaders you've ever heard of. Howard Schultz, like the founder of Starbucks, Paul Allen, the founder of Ancestry.com. We just had Clifford Hudson, the former CEO of Sonic. Like, these are the kind of people that come on the podcast to talk about things they failed at and how they've gotten ahead in life. So it's a fun time.
Fantastic. Justin, thank you very much for your time. Again, you're listening to One-on-One. I'm your host, Jimmy Olsen. We've been chatting with Justin Brady from The Justin Brady Show. Go find it. Listen to it. Sir, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Jimmy. Appreciate it.
And, as always, I always put that out there. If you ever have anything you want to, talk about, we'll create that conspiracy theory right here.
Okay. I'll let you know if I think of it.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to One-on-One. I'm your host, Jimmy Olsen. Thank you for listening to One-on-One. You can always subscribe to this podcast through Apple Podcasts, Google Play, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. You can also subscribe to my YouTube page, which is My Buddy Jimmy 101.